Hi everyone and welcome to fan commentary on Dark Wish Part 2 for Power Rangers Mystic Force. I always said that Dark Wish felt like the original Star Wars trilogy. It feels very similar to the way it's structured. Dark Wish Part 1 is like A New Hope. Dark Wish 2 is like Empire, which is the middle of the ground road where not much happens. There is action, but it's mostly story that sets up the third and final part, which is like Return of the Jedi. Now, the differences between the original Maji Ranger episode and the Dark Wish episodes in the original story, they actually used the Snow Prince in the main story, which is somewhat loosely similar to the Tribunal, which Snow Gel, the Snow Prince, had kind of like a way to determine if the Rangers were ready to get these legend powers. Now, another difference with the legend powers is that the legend powers are from the experience that the Rangers had gained. Eventually, when you became so proficient in it, you would evolve to a higher spirit, which is what the ancient mystic modes are. That's how the humans evolved into those beings, which at least explains how, like, Solaris Knight slash Magi Shine, how they had those ancient modes were created, kind of monster forms, and you had human forms. It's just like, why would you ever have both? It didn't really make any sense, but at least in Magi Ranger, they kind of covered it in that area. But Mystic Force, since they didn't go in that direction of using that story, it gets lost, so there's no explanation of why there's a human form and there's a monster form. I will say though, it is somewhat disappointing. The one thing that the two series didn't do is really go into depth of the magical realm on how it really worked. I mean, I do give it credit here because the Tribunal of Magic gives us like a huge explanation of how some of the rules of magic work in the world. While in Magi Ranger, the only time we ever saw Magitopia was in the movie, and it was so limited. Literally, it's only a 3-4 minute sequence where we get introduced to the Rangers' spirits that are used for them to change, and that's all we really got. We really never understood how the structure worked and like how the magic realm was created. I will give the writers a lot of credit for part two because they try to explain a lot of the questions people would bring up. Here, for example, is that Imperius intentionally made it so the Rangers could remember that they were Power Rangers. What I always believe that he did it because he's arrogant and stupid and they take advantage of it, but I think also because of that wish, Gingy took advantage of it so that the Rangers could remember every little detail and not just they knew they were Rangers or whatnot or new people, because there was ways to pick and choose what they remember to make them feel horrible versus to remember everything. I do like that they also paid attention to a lot of the logical consistencies, meaning if the Rangers were erased, Udana and Claire would not know who the Power Rangers are. Same thing with Toby. He would not know Nick because he never arrived at Briarwood, and so they would not exist. Although it brings up a question. Does the Rangers have two versions of themselves in this universe, or has it just always been one and they just simply replace them because it's kind of a semi time travel logic hole. But there is still some conflicting issues with this logic. While most of it is good, but one of the main problems is coming up with Korag. The problem is that he doesn't understand what happened, and so the Rangers had to tell him while they had pieced it together. The problem is that Korag would has the memories of what happened, in the original timeline and what happened in the current timeline. And he shouldn't have even bothered asking the Rangers, like, what happened. He should really know. The only thing he has to assume is that they were able to get some sort of power that changed history. And the only logical conclusion is the Gingy wish. I do like how they linked Korag to Fireheart because it makes sense. Even though the Rangers were erased, they're the only ones that changed. So technically, everything else has transpired regardless, meaning Fireheart's egg would still exist and someone else would find him. The only thing that doesn't really make any sense, why is Phineas still with Korag? Because that happened in the other timeline where 50 Below attacked him and weakened him so he needed help. But this is an alternate timeline where this didn't happen. So it kind of doesn't make any sense there. It's they're melding the two and they should have erased that one, and Korag should not really technically have a memory because he's outside when this occurred while Imperius and everyone were inside that main chamber, which should have the memories intact. And you'd think Imperius, because he hates Korag, he would erase his memory too. I do like that they put in a lot of details with the characters. This is a character episode, so I like that the writers got everyone to have certain beats, and they hit their hit what they usually do. Their fun moments like Chip acting goofy, which comes into play in a few areas. Xander does his famous Xander stuff, and of course, this I think solidifies who Korag is. Nick explicitly says, "Yeah, you want to take over the planet and get rid of us, but you want to do it in an honorable way," which is kind of confusing. Does it really matter? And it shows his type of character, which gives more questions to him. There is some justification because they betrayed him and they're going to take over the master, and he can't let that happen. But still, it is like, well, why didn't just Korag do it himself? Because if you think about it, if Korag had such a problem with this entire issue, instead of involving the Rangers, he could technically try to break in and also steal the lamp. There's also another thing that you have to think about, like, why did Korag not get his magic back? Because none of the other events transpired, so he should have his magic. It's picking and choosing which events occurred. And you can argue, well, maybe Imperius did it, but if he chose to keep Korag in his state, why didn't he erase him? Why didn't he brainwash him? Why didn't he just make him disappear? There's some issues because of that. I would also consider Dark Wish Part 2 the best episode Mystic Force ever did because the story is very competent. It tries to justify all the things that I said. It improves in a lot of areas on the original Maji Ranger episode. You do lose the Snow Prince in the story, which makes Daggeron's story part of it lost as well, which is why he's missing in part 2 and 3 pretty much. That's the reason why the Snow Prince story happened later on. At least they kind of did something there later. But also, it's like they put their A game into this. The actors, the writers, the cinematography, like all the little details, making it dark, black and white, colorless to make it feel. They also dressed up the town so that it looks like junk. Toby was homeless basically. Everyone looked like garbage. Necroli even has this nice fun scene trying to stop them, which is great. The one thing I miss from classic PR is that the civilian fights. That's what original MMPR was all about. They loved doing it because, they only had that ability to do at the time. They couldn't shoot Ranger fights. They didn't have a lot of stock footage they can use. So they relied solely on the actors who were mainly performers who can fight really good and convincing. I like that the actors can act in newer seasons, and that's what they mainly focus on. But I wish there was a combination of good acting, good fighting ability, and that's what these guys did. Every one of them, from Chip to Nick, did amazing work because the majority of the time it's them doing it, and you can see they put in that time and effort, especially for Rostarani. He put in an extensive amount of work to make him look like he knew what he was doing, because that's what I miss from classic PR when they couldn't do their stunts. Even I will say is that every character got a lot of things to do, which is surprising because in standard episodes, which is not a lot going on, Madison gets lost, Chip gets lost, but these three parts, especially part two, which has a lot of, info dumping, all the characters get something to do. And it's just like, if they can do it in such a compressed episode, why can't they do it all the time? We have Xander's bit here, Chip, Madison gets a lot of stuff where that's her character. Vita gets a lot of, one liners in, and Nick, of course, is being the leader, so he doesn't say much and he really responds toward everything. Now, I always wondered when they were running down this hill, did some of the stunt guys fall down, because that's a really steep hill. You'll also notice that there is some technical issues during this fight. Nick is, any most of Nick's scenes and Vita's scenes, they're all in the rain while the others are in mostly sunlight. Obviously, they couldn't film, these over in multiple days, so they hope you didn't see it raining. But in a lot of shots, especially when they're in slow mo, you can clearly see it's raining on these guys. I wish they had gone back and actually shot with rain, because I think it makes them look more cooler to fight in a weather conditions, and it would kind of make sense. It's just like, it's a magical world, so why not have a weird weather condition if it's raining? Maybe that just tests everyone in a more hard way, because that's what this is. It's a big test. People who have attempted to go to the Tribunal of Magic failed. They either took the easy way out or they got killed by these guys, and so they ended up taking their space in order to act like guards slash deterrents for anyone to go to the tribunal, which it does make sense because the tribunal has a lot of power because they can revoke or grant any type of wish overriding a genie. So that has a lot of power, even though they do have, their own minds and they have to make their decisions. So it's not easily, to trick them. But there probably is many ways in the past where they've been tricked in order to grant particular wishes by, people who were intelligent in order to manipulate them. While the tribunal is very powerful, they do function under specific rules, meaning the Dark One is the extreme pessimism, I would say. The one is the extreme of compassion, while Red is the middle ground, mixing the two together, and they all make up their decisions whether or not they should grant or revoke a wish. Which is cool because, again, it's just like a court system. There's checks and balances, and they are basically this, which helps in that regard because they have to protect the world. What if someone had used a genie and wished that all magic was erased? They would step in and revoke that wish because they would be erased themselves, and or the world would be thrown in imbalanced. There is no balance per se because they don't, later on they talk about how they see the world as long as they have magic, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. That's a construct for humans that they really take. They only care about, the ability of magic, whether it's there or not. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. Technically, if you think about it, this fight is worthless because He gets the key for the door. That's another test, whether they, fall for it or not. It is a worthless key. So really, they could actually technically skip the fight, skip the door, and go directly to the other door, which is the correct one because it doesn't require a key. All that chip did was open the door, and that was the answer. I think all these tests are technically derived from whatever the person caused. Either their wish screwed up or they were trying to reverse a wish. Everything is unique. So maybe the fight was specifically tailored for the Rangers because they are Power Rangers and they can fight. While in another person's circumstance, they would not fight. While it might have been a puzzle. And here is another example because the Rangers had to learn that, they screwed up. They took the easy way out, and that's what caused them here. I like Madison because they actually use her for what she's supposed to be. She's the one who thinks logically and one step ahead. I'm like, right. Why would we go to the Tribunal of Magic to reverse a wish, but then all of a sudden, where we have this easy way to go back to the Ruckporium and see Toby working, and they would go and help? That doesn't make any sense. So Nick was like, no, this has to be a trick. We have to get the wish reversed. So they finally had learned one part of their mistake. The world suffers solely because of what they did. They took advantage of you because you're human. You have that flaw of being tired. And again, like I said in part one, you can't blame him per se because anyone would falter after a while. I do like how Chip actually closes the door out of courtesy because that's what a Chip thing would do. And this was a pretty cool effect back in 2006. That's all CG water. And this is pretty much what part one paid for because part two had a lot of visual effects that they had to do, especially the Fireheart episode. So part one was mostly Super Sentai footage. I think the Tribunal of Magic is the best part that Mystic Force ever did. I really wish they had used them for another go for some particular reason, like they had helped them, I don't know, solve a conundrum or solve a piece, because they were very cool in the idea of this, far left, far right, middle ground characters that, decide the fate of magic. I do find it interesting that the Tribunal of Magic, who should know all, and they don't know that they're Power Rangers. So finds interesting. So they don't look at everything in totally. So they would not. They didn't realize what they were coming in from, which it kind of makes it would make sense they would know because a huge change on Earth just occurred. You'd think they would understand. Oh, maybe they're from this thing, but no, they're not perfect themselves. I still wish they had answered one particular issue I always had. Since Fireheart was still existed and Korag was the one who unlocked him, birthed him, and made him grow up. Obviously, he was a better trainer than the other guys. But why didn't they just go get Daggeron's help? He could have been in this part too. It would have been nice if Daggeron had been, freed and helped along, and he would have been up to snuff, and he would have been along with them. I guess it's the main reason why is because it would have been a third wheel, and he would have probably most likely showed them like, well, you did this and did that. Then it also technically brings up another issue because if you think about it, Gingy is in the Imperious lamp right now, but there should be a Jinji in the original Solaris lamp. So shouldn't they be able to go into the cave and get Jinji's lamp and use the wish from Jinji to reverse it? This is the kind of the problem where you start thinking about the story where certain things break. If they had just got a little bit of an extra detail where it's like, oh yeah, we also, blew up Daggeron's cave and killed the frog and destroyed the Solaris lamp, then I would have been totally fine. But since they ignore it, that possibility still exists. I never understood what Chip had that fascination with his cape. It's a cape. If you like capes, wear a cape. The Mystic Force cape is really not that, special in that regard. And of course, it would not be easy because we would not have a part three. But because again, the reason why they've given the test is simply because the Rangers would not admit that they screwed up. There is some argument for the Ranger side, but overall, yeah, they did screw up. And this is their final thing. Will you fall for the torment, the sorrow, the loss of everyone being under control of Imperius, which again, I do like seeing the world actually lost, and you would see like what this world would be like if one of the villains had won, because I always found it interesting, like what would they do? They do these extensive judgments and but hope the person learns from their mistakes. Does it make sense? If you're gonna easy peasy reverse a wish, then they could just always be used as a stopgap. Say you did like a ridiculous wish and you screwed up the planet, and you could just go to the tribunal and reverse it, and it'll be like, no harm, no foul. Like somehow you made a wish and your a family had disappeared and died or something. You would never learn from the mistake if you just simply went to the tribunal and they just reversed it all the time with no issue. If you like my content, consider leaving a like and subscribing.